y'all been keeping up with the blonde and the brunette girl that have drama on TikTok, Katie and Kayla. But here's the thing. If white women are ever in an argument, oh, I'm taking the brunette side like that. Like, if I could snap with my left hand, like that. Like, so quickly. And I have very valid reasons. First of all, this white man told me that, because the thing is, guys, I grew up with white people. I be around white people. I be asking white people questions all about being white. Like, I'm very ignorant. And I was like, what's up with the blondes and brunettes? He was like, well, like, blonde brunettes are like subjectively hotter. But like a 10 who's a blonde is hotter than a 10 who's a brunette. I ain't like that. That felt like oppression. Also, I've been going to white schools my whole entire life. And I can always remember the brunettes were the nicest to the black girls. There are some brunettes, me to this day, me and my girl get together like we were in high school almost 10 years ago and talk about how pretty they are to this day. The blondes, never been. I'm telling you, white people are the most fascinating people on earth. Like, I literally do not care. Because somebody in the comments was like, yeah, there's a hair color hierarchy and it's colorism for them. And I was like, oh, that's why they're so like offended within these comments. First of all, I am kind of disturbed and a little empowered by the influence I've had over white people's thinking, but that's neither here nor there. And it really is just like colorism, because white people literally give attributes to like a physicality. Like, literally blondes are seen as like dumber and like sluttier, and brunettes are seen as like kinder. And it's so fascinating to me because I made these videos and all of these white people are like, I feel so seen. And I'm like, bro, are we seeing the same thing? Like, I've never felt like I've seen like a disparity in blondes and brunettes portrayed in media, because to me, they all just look white. If anything, I see like an absence of gingers, because like, to me, I assume that in white people's minds, people with red hair who are ginger are like an opposition to whiteness, right? Like, and it kind of also showed me how when it comes to like colorism in white people, it's very difficult for them to understand. Like, yeah, there's black people on your screen, but they're all light skinned. And I don't know, it's just fascinating to me. I feel you, the curtains, Omar. Like, I feel you. It's fascinating. And somebody else was like, where do black hair white people fit in? And I was like, bro, I don't know. Like, y'all gotta tell me. Like, I don't know. And I also feel like blondness is really fascinating to me too, because I feel like if we could put like a hierarchy of hair, I feel like blondness is the most equivalent to whiteness. And it's this way that I feel like white women who like dye their hair and make these decisions don't kind of even understand how like them doing that is like conforming to the whiteness that they don't feel like they're a part of. It's really fascinating. It's also really fascinating the white people that are like, well, you know, like black girls have their hair blonde. Yeah, because we look better. Like, what do you mean?
So I wanted to comment on this because I am a biracial person who has like grown up within white communities, and then I went to high school in an area that was mostly black and Hispanic, and the hair color hierarchy within like the white people stuff is crazy. There is no question ask any girl who's a brunette. There's no question that blondes are considered better. Even blondes themselves think that blondes are better. I once was like at a dinner with a family friend of ours who was white, and my mom and I were like sitting there, and she was like talking about her daughter when she was in high school, and she goes, oh, you know, like all the other girls were jealous of her because she was like a blonde with blue eyes and she's pretty. And my mom and I literally looked at each other, we were like, what the fuck did this woman just say to us? Like, they really hold that shit over people's heads where they're like, well, I'm blonde and blue eyes, so I'm better than you. And it's all this like whole ties into that white supremacy shit. The reason why blondes are considered more attractive than brunettes, like why a 10 who's a blonde is better than a 10 who's a brunette, is because a blonde is more assuredly closer to whiteness than a brunette is. As like a white Hispanic person, like growing up, I always saw myself within like these other white people where I was like, yeah, I'm like, I look like them. I'm just like I'm pale. Like I have brown hair. Like, I mean, I was tanner than them, and I obviously had different features than them because like, you know, I'm not European, but like, you know, same shit. You know what I mean? It never mattered. I was never going to be seen as attractive as them, as respectable as them, as popular as them, as nice as them, as cool as them. It did not matter. And the blonde versus brunette thing is really crucial in this thing, because blondes are really like more respected than brunettes because they're seen as more attractive because they're closer to whiteness. Growing up, like, I always wondered why white guys never found me attractive, but always, like, the only people who find me attractive are Hispanic guys or black guys or men of color, like, but white guys never found me attractive ever. Even though I benefit from my whiteness in a lot of ways and I'm perceived as white, I live my life in a lot of ways the same way that a white person does. It's like obvious to me the racial disparity that exists, because the hair color thing, it is absolutely colorism. It is their way of weeding out who is actually white and who is not actually white. So yeah, you're totally right. Also, of course, like when they're talking about blonde versus brunette, they're obviously talking about white women. They're not like considering the fact that like Asian women have like naturally dark hair, or that black women have naturally dark hair. They don't consider any of that. They are only talking about who's hotter, blonde white women or brunette white women. And then women of color get absolutely no acknowledgement in that sense.
Okay, not only is there a hair color hierarchy, but there's also a hair texture hierarchy. And honestly, you can see this in pretty much every form of media that has a predominantly white audience or a predominantly white cast. Honestly, you could probably even look at this in an academic sense, but these are just my observations as someone who actually is biracial. My dad is black, my mom is white, but this is what I've noticed. The blonde versus brunette plotline is pretty much in every single form of media, comics, books, movies, TV shows, you name it, it's there. I noticed this most frequently in early 2000s media. Early 2000s media was full of blonde girls who were very thin, very maybe tall, blonde, pale skin, and often at odds with a brunette character who was seen as less popular, quote unquote ugly, even though obviously that's not true. Maybe the brunette character was a little bit overweight, but they were always at odds. And honestly, even within this trope, you would often see the brunette characters going through some sort of transformation to be similar to the white blonde woman. Like, who can forget the very famous makeover scene from Princess Diaries where Mia goes from a brunette with frizzy curly hair to straight hair, and then all of a sudden she is beautiful and popular. Media basically shapes culture. Hair also plays a very crucial role when it comes to people's identity and culture. And even just think about how often we make fun of YA novels and media for perpetuating the I'm not like other girls cliche. Odds are the I'm not like other girls girl has brown hair. Which is very strange because brown hair almost makes it seem like you're the underdog type of character, but brown hair is the most common color basically on the planet, I think. So yes, in short, the hair hierarchy is very, very real. It plays into texture, plays into color, even plays into...
That makes me feel that there is not one unique experience out there. I can't. As a natural blonde hair girl in denial because my hair is getting darker, and right now it's up to everybody's opinion to decide whether I'm blonde or not. But I am blonde. You see? Like, this really triggers me. But actually, you know what's interesting? Whether people call my hair blonde or not has a lot to do with their ethnicity, which is amazing. Because the more from the West, Europe, those people come from, the more likely they are to tell me, like, you're not really blonde, you're light brown. And more of the East part of Europe or like the whole globe, they will call me blonde. So this is why I love them. I'm kidding. Well, so I will explain to you my experience, why I think I have this hair hierarchy only for myself, because I don't necessarily think that blonde women look better than dark haired women. Absolutely not. This is only for me and in my brain. So when I was growing up, I had this concept, like I was brought up to this idea of beauty that the rarer you are, the prettier you are. So curls were prettier because they are rarer, like genetically. Color dyes are prettier because they're rarer, blah, 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 and blonde hair goes there as well. So basically in my family, if you had curly blonde hair with green eyes, you were like the most beautiful person alive. Like, and we have a lot of people like that in my family. And it was not only the family who gave me this idea of beauty, that blonde hair better. It was also everywhere I went, people would compliment my hair color. Everywhere. It was like a thing. So eventually you start forming this idea that your hair is better than everybody else just because of being blonde. It does not matter that it's fine hair, and like I don't have that much hair. My hair is blonde, so automatically I felt like I had the best hair in the room because I was getting the compliment from everyone in the room. So, and there is this concept that if someone is making a compliment, they kind of want to have the same thing like you. It's weird. That's why you should say mashallah, because of the bad eye. And someone can be envious in a bad way. This is some East thinking going on. However, so when I started losing the blonde hair, and I think a lot of natural blonde women can attest to that, I started feeling less pretty. So that's why my friends know this. And if I feel like the most confident person, if I put so much effort, if one of my friends would say, your hair be looking a bit brown, that's it. I won't feel beautiful that day. And it has nothing to do with other people. It's only for me. Only I feel not pretty if I have dark.
No, because this is so true, especially in the dance world. It always seemed really weird to me, but unless you were super short, if you had darker hair or darker skin, you were in the middle or the back, and all of the blondes were in the front unless they got too tall. Regardless of talent, if you were blonde and probably skinny, you got front row status, you got all the best treatment, you wouldn't get yelled at. Basically, blonde privilege. They'd also sort the classes by hair color almost sometimes. And you better bet the ones that were mostly blonde got the better choreography.
I was literally having this conversation with my friend about how we are both gingers growing up, and I'm a freckle-faced ginger, like extreme freckle-faced. You can't see it. I don't know if I've got a filter on. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. But I have a lot of freckles on my body. And growing up, as a white person with red hair and freckles, I was often ostracized from the popular group because I didn't have the blonde hair, blue eyes. Although I have the blue eyes, I didn't have the blonde hair, or I didn't have the sexy brunette. And the hierarchy is real in our hair colors. And there's like a difference between a boxed blonde versus a real blonde, like a natural blonde. And then there's dirty blonde versus like sandy blonde versus like true blonde. And then there's like mousy brown, and then there's like the luscious brunette, and then there's the fiery redhead who is like the devil's child. And I am currently raising my own little ginger ninja, as I like to call her. And she is also freckly faced and full of vigor. So the hierarchy is a real
Hair hierarchy. Take it from someone that looks like me. I have heard every ginger joke out there. Not kidding. I'd say about half the other redheads I know dyed their hair out of being bullied for the color. And I have always been subjected to some backhanded ass comment. Oh my god, you're so pretty, for a redhead. But let me tell you something. Those same bitches that bullied me are now dyeing their hair to get my exact color, paying thousands of dollars, and it still doesn't even come close to the tone. They're getting freckles tattooed on their face. I was treated very differently as a child with red hair, but now I can't go to the grocery store without at least 2 people complimenting my color. All the while, my hair's looking like a rat's nest. No one notices. Everyone's just focused on the color. So yeah, I could have given in to the peer pressure and dyed my hair, but I'd rather be rare than basic.
No, because, let's talk about this and where it comes from. For the sake of this, we will only really be talking about blonde and brunette. We won't really go into red hair because it's so rare that the stereotypes around it are they require their own video. But to first address this problem, we have to recognize what the problem is, therefore what the hierarchy is. And focusing just on hair color, not hair texture, it generally is blondes above brunettes. Now, why is that? Before I tell you why this occurs, I will give you examples of this happening. If you grew up in public school, you probably heard a lot, blondes are more fun, brunettes are smarter, that kind of stuff. And when it comes to sexual beings or someone that, a guy wants to sleep with or have a sexual relationship with, they will typically try to go after a blonde. A lot of this is because of the social stigma that has been built up around hair color. But that social stigma comes from white supremacy. I spent a decent portion of my year last year studying white supremacists and fascists by using my appeared whiteness to infiltrate those spaces and know what is going on, understand what is happening so we can better tackle it and fight it. Which I have hundreds of stories from that and hundreds of different ways I can give advice to better tackle fascism just from what I learned from doing that. But they have this obsession with Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, and what do Scandinavians and Eastern Europeans look like? They have blonde hair and blue eyes. And that is a old beauty standard. I mean, it goes back thousands of years. The blue eyes, blonde hair goes back so far. It has been such a beauty standard for so long due to white supremacy being so ingrained into European culture that even Europeans determined what other Europeans weren't white during that time frame and who was. And during that time, well, the ones that were paler and blonde and had blue eyes were white, and the ones who had dark hair, dark eyes tended to be a little more tan. For example, certain Irishmen and a lot of Southern Italians, a lot of Greeks, they were told you're not white. Now, obviously, people that are still tan and still have dark hair and dark eyes can still be considered white. That does not define whiteness anymore. But the effects of it, the beauty standards that came from it, are still here today.
Okay, so this hair color hierarchy thing is fascinating, and I was right about, like, thinking, like, the redheads were tough. Like, when I wanted to seem more, like, tough and powerful, I would dye my hair red, because the Roman Empire kind of started this whole thing, where the ruling classes tinted their hair red. Middle, blonde, lower, black. And when you look throughout, like, European and Scandinavian history and mythology, like, yeah, like, it really is like that. Like, for example, look at Germanic and Scandinavian mythology. Thor, the god of thunder. It's not some jacked blonde guy. It was like a beer keg-bellied redhead. Look at the royal family in the Renaissance period, and like in Britain, and like even in, like, you know, other countries like Spain and stuff like that. Like Catherine of Aragon, she was a redhead. King Henry was a redhead. Elizabeth I, redhead. And they were considered, like, beautiful, not in spite of their red hair, but because of it. It was like it was the color of, like, power and majesty. But it was also rare. And it was also something that was, like, you know, a very kingly color to possess. And we all know how, like, we love to hate the rich. So, like, could you imagine, like, after the fall of the Roman Empire, when these, like, tinting laws, like, kind of went out of fashion? If you were a redhead, you were probably kind of, like, hunted in the streets. Sort of like, how the nobles were in Paris and, like, Versailles after the French Revolution. You know, you were persona non grata. Like, I can imagine that, like, you know, that's where it comes into with this, like, thing about, like, redheads being evil and, like, having no souls. It must stem from all of the conflict that came from the Roman Empire, because they were the first colonizers. And this thing about, like, red hair being seen as, like, kingly and stuff like that, because a lot of royals were like, let's face it, they were tyrants. Like, behind closed doors, they were not exactly well liked.
Grew up around a good deal of white people, so I learned about the hair color hierarchy early. And on top of that, just consuming media that was for and starring white women, you kind of, like, got to see how this all worked, right? There's a reason why the term redheaded stepchild exists. You see that South Park episode about the gingers? Like, I have a theory about where all this weirdness white people have with redheads come from, but I don't have time to get into the history of the United Kingdom. The real fight with white women in the hair color hierarchy is blondes and brunettes. The full idea of the blonde versus brunette struggle, watch Gossip Girl. Blair and Serena's entire personalities are based off of the blonde and brunette stereotypes. Serena's the blonde, pretty, popular, kind of slutty one. Blair is the smart, studious, kind of serious, you know, jealous of her blonde, beautiful best friend. If you want to see a real fight, start a rumor that someone's a bottle blonde. There's a group of white girls that I met through an internship, and even after it was done, we still like hung out sometimes. These two blonde white girls that for whatever reason just did not fuck with each other. One day we were out drinking, right? One of the blonde girls, let's call her Amy, was not there. The other blonde girl, let's call her Emily, was. The previous week I was supposed to meet Amy for dinner, but she just stood me up. I was telling the other girls about it and how she had pissed me off because she wasn't even like apologetic about the fact that she just like blew me off. And the brunette girls was like, ugh, Amy's so annoying. She's such a stuck-up bitch. She thinks she's better than everybody. She needs to go get her fucking roots done. Side note, telling a white woman she needs to get her roots done, peak insult. Now Emily, a natural blonde from a long line of blondes, was like, what are you talking about? I was like, oh, you didn't know? Amy's not really blonde. Emily had a smirk on her face like a fucking Cheshire cat. Fast forward like a month and we're at this girl's birthday party. Emily and Amy regularly got into like a passive aggressive kind of sass fest, but this time was different because Emily decided to call Amy a bottled blonde bitch. I tell you, Amy had the same reaction I would have if someone called me an N-word. I'm telling you, that hair color shit.
That blows my mind because you see a lot of it with people from Latin America. A lot of people dye their hair blonde, lighten it, get rayitos, whatever. A lot of people say it's to hide the canas, you know, for style. And for some people, I'm sure it is. But for a lot of people, y'all are just pick-me's. And if you're getting offended, zoom in on the word where I said a lot. I went on a date with this guy a few weeks ago who was like, I love that you keep your hair dark, you know, you don't lighten it or anything. And internally I was like, what? But not what, like, I don't get it. What, like, I appreciate that you caught that too, that there's this hierarchy within the community that only they really care about. They do see it as like a color or something. And y'all reinforce it by conforming. And I do get that some people are like, we look better blonde than you do, you know, whatever, stroke your own ego. But a lot of y'all don't do it for that reason. Y'all just do it to conform.
Because I had to do a little bit more fact checking, and I found out more that like helps explain this sort of like girl next door thing. Because, okay, like I said in the other videos, the Roman Empire, they were like the first colonizers, and they had these rules about hair tinting. So, like the ruling class was red, the middle class was blonde, and, the like brunettes and like dark hairs, blacks, like that was, like the poor people. So blondes, the middle class. What do people say about blondes today? That, oh my God, they have it so easy, blah, blah, blah. Oh, they have more fun. There's another thing where like, there's like the girl next door stereotype, you know, it's like all American or like, you know, sort of like the every girl kind of thing. And, people also say elitist. And when you look at middle class people who are like, kind of like shitty Karens, they're not actually like rich and they're not poor. It's always middle class. Like, you know, the rich people are crazy and the poor people are crazy, but like the real poorest and the real riches, if you put them together, they have the same amount of crazy and they tend to get along. It's the middle that sucks. And, if you're middle class, you kind of do have it easier. And you are kind of the girl next door, because you're not struggling, you're not starving, and you're not looking over your shoulder because people want to stab you in the back to like take your castle. You're just kind of living. You're doing okay. And it was also very easily accessible to bleach your hair, like even back in ancient times, because all you had to do was piss in a bucket and let it ferment, and you could bleach your clothes, white your whites, you could bleach your hair, like piss was bleach when you let it ferment. So it was very easy to do also. And the practice was actually developed by the Celts. And the Celts were sort of like, you know how like Britain has like Commonwealth? Like they have like, they had places that they ruled over. The Celts were kind of Commonwealth to the Roman Empire for a long time before they were like, we want to be like our own thing. And then there was a big fight and they got exterminated. But like, they were kind of like the middle class Commonwealth of the Roman Empire for a long time. And they started the like piss bleaching.
Is about how weird white people get about hair color. I am half white. 99% of white people do not see me as one of them. The 1% is probably my dad, because I am an awful lot like him. And also, I went to a high school in a very affluent area that was only 4% people of color. So, in 6th grade, I transferred from a school that was located in a very deprived former manufacturing town to a district that, like, is like doctors and lawyers and stuff. Still a public school, but a very wealthy public school. There were two things that I immediately noticed. People were taller, probably due to genetics and better nutrition, and people were much blonder. Like, I went from a poor school district with practically no blonde people, like maybe like one or two, to a school district where it was like 50-50. And to me, that is a sign that this connects very closely to different ethnic groups of white people and also different socioeconomic classes of white people. Because having that super blonde Anglo-Saxon look is also specifically associated with wealth. Like, first of all, maintaining blonde hair in a salon is extremely expensive. Like, it can cost you thousands. And also, it's worth considering that a bunch of groups that we consider white today were not always considered as white. Like, blonde hair means that you are the whitest of the white because you are maybe descended from Anglo-Saxons. The other important thing is that this almost entirely applies to white women. It does not apply to white men in the same way, and I think that's because it's very much about how white men see white women. Like, in terms of stereotypes, I think this is pretty harmless, but like in Parks and Rec, you do see Ron Swanson say he likes pretty dark-haired women in breakfast food. And this is like another thing that makes the comparison to colorism really apt, because like, obviously I cannot speak for the black community, even though I suspect this is true for y'all too, but in South Asia, colorism is far more harshly applied to women than it is to men.
Yep, I could confirm. I went to a predominantly white all-girls school, and I will tell you, majority of the blondes at that school were not natural blondes. In the white world, being blonde is like the top, you know, think Targaryen. But, you know, being brunette was like regular. So if you really wanted to show off yourself, you would become a blonde.
And this is why you should never believe white people when they say they don't see color.
Not because you're right, and it is fascinating, and I have a bit of an explanation. Disclaimer, I'm not a professional, I just have a hyper-focus in anthropology, in anthropological history and genetics and the way it all works and why humans are, I don't know, I like it, it's fascinating. What the hell? My cats are being crackheads. I gave them catnip. Alright, continuing on. Naturally, human beings are supposed to have a lot of melanin in their skin, so we are supposed to have dark skin, dark hair, because it is a protection from sun damage. So pale skin is actually a mutation caused to allow us to live in areas like Europe where there is a lot of clouds. However, blonde hair and blue eyes are actually a mutation caused by inbreeding. And do you know in European who was known for the most inbreeding? The nobles. Thus, blonde hair, blue eyes became associated with royalty and thus became a desirable trait. However, do you know what else happens when you inbreed? You become stupid. Inbred people are not intelligent. It's just the way evolution works. You inbreed, it messes up the genetics, and it just causes the brain to not work the way it's supposed to. Which honestly could be an explanation for a lot of the things that white people did. Just saying. And as inbreeding has become less normalized in our society, due to be like, oh, people figuring, oh, hey, maybe that's what's causing problems, kind of, can explain stuff. I sidetracked, sorry. But blonde hair, blue eyes, mutation, yada, yada, yada. Because it was mutation associated with royalty and nobility, it became a desirable trait. But also, blonde hair, blue eyes is a mutation caused by inbreeding, which can also make people pretty dumb and hard to understand stuff. And that's coming from somebody who's naturally blonde and naturally has blue eyes. Now, I'm not saying that was an inbred. Now, I'm not saying I'm inbred. I'm not saying I'm an inbred. I'm just saying that my ancestors a long time ago were, and unfortunately those genes are still going. They are recessive genes. However, if some people have those genes in them, it can get passed down. So me and all my siblings are all naturally blonde and naturally blue-eyed because my mother and my father both had naturally blonde hair, blue eye, recessive genes, and just the way the freaking Punnett squares worked out. I don't know, I just think genetics and genetical history and how it is an explanation for, it can be an explanation for a lot of things in human history. It's just fascinating. Sorry. I would post articles and sources to back up my argument. I just don't have the energy to go look for them, and I don't know what to look for because it's just all information I've gathered from absorbing stuff all over the years.